Hey everybody, I'm Jason Verlinde, and you are listening to the Fretboard Journal Podcast, where once a week we share some of our favorite guitar stories from around the world. If over the years you've been reading our magazine or listening to these shows, you know that guitar makers and guitar repair people are a rather unique breed. They are passionate, they are driven, they are often obsessive individuals. It is what we celebrate in the pages of the Fretboard Journal, here on the podcast, and at our annual Fretboard Summit. And at this year's Fretboard Summit, we held a guitar repair panel that was definitely not your typical fare. I tasked Evan Gluck, the immensely talented and also hilarious proprietor of New York Guitar Repair, to moderate this panel, and I'll be honest, he went deep. Rather than field questions about neck resets or humidity control or any of the usual things you'd probably just be able to Google, he asked his stage mates about what makes them tick, how they found their craft, where they are still works in progress, and so much more. It is a deep dive into what it means to be a high-level luthier. And speaking of high level, I should just add that the folks on stage with Evan were a who's who of luthiers. We've got Tyler Geske of Emerald City Guitars, Trevor Healy, Mark Stutman of Folkway Music, TJ Thompson, and Nashville's Joe Glaser. Our 2024 Fretboard Summit was simply amazing, as you hopefully know. So due to demand, we've already opened up our 2025 Fretboard Summit registration. As you may have noticed, this weekend is a pretty special opportunity to connect with acclaimed builders, great musicians, and like-minded guitar fanatics. It's 3 days of great and very unique programming, inspiring concerts, workshops, and yes, housed inside of all of this madness, there's also a giant guitar fair where you can buy gear from over 50 brands and luthiers. If you want to sign up, go to fretboardsummit.org and click on that register button. There is no other guitar gathering quite like this, and space is limited every year. Our podcast is brought to you by a few brands that love what we are doing, one of which is right here in Seattle, Washington, Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar, one of the coolest collections of vintage instruments, including synths and keyboards and pedals and acoustics and electrics. If you are ever in Seattle, Washington, go visit their showroom. And speaking of guitar repair, they have a full-service guitar repair and restoration building, like right next to their actual store, with folks who are more than happy to work on your acoustic, electric, even amplifier, some of the best in the business. We are also brought to you by Stringjoy Strings, where you can get 10% off of your first order at stringjoy.com with the promo code Fretboard. They've got banjo strings now, they've got mandolin strings, and of course, custom acoustic and electric strings. Check out what they are up to. We are also brought to you by our friends at Peghead Nation. You can get your first month free or $20 off any annual subscription with the promo code Fretboard when you check out. If you've never been to Peghead Nation, it's a who's who of great musicians and artists teaching you all how to play Americana music, bluegrass, jazz, you name it. I love this site. It's not intimidating. It's a lot of fun. And I have gone down so many rabbit holes using Peghead Nation over the last few years. I hope you will as well. And of course, we are brought to you by the Fretboard Journal magazine. Go to fretboardjournal.com, click on that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Our 55th issue is going to mail in just a couple of weeks, so I would love for you all to get it. We also still have copies of our 54th issue, which many of you have said has our greatest cover ever. Go to fretboardjournal.com. All right, so before we get to this, since I know most of you are listening to this and have no visual on the voices you are hearing, Evan Gluck is the first voice you're going to hear. He is hilarious. You're going to love him. The second voice you are going to hear, the guy who says he's unemployable, is Tyler Geske of Emerald City Guitars. The next voice you're going to hear, the tinkerer, is Trevor Healy. Mark Stutman is the next person on stage who says that he is observant to a fault. TJ Thompson is the one who brings up how he was raised. And then last but definitely not least is Joe Glaser, Nashville's acclaimed repair person. So this is our 2024 Fretboard Summit Repair Panel. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks as always for tuning in.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. Thank you for Fretboard and Jason for hooking all this up, and another great show. So I was asked to moderate this. So your first question is probably why, but no, so this is going to be a little repair panel that hopefully will go a little bit differently than some. I want to introduce the folks who are here. Tyler Geske from, did I pronounce that?
Yeah,
awesome. From Emerald City Guitars. They're out in Seattle. And this is my good friend Trevor Healy from Healy Guitars, who's got some beautiful guitars in the other building. And he's an amazing repair guy and builder as well. Mark Stutman from Canada, who is folkway music and just amazing. And I don't have to introduce TJ Thompson, but I will. That's TJ, really good friend of mine and brilliant guy. And last minute addition, although I thought he was coming the whole time, is Joe Glaser from Nashville. And I probably don't have to introduce Joe, but I will. So this could go south quickly, and I was thankful that Jason asked me to moderate this, because if one person needs to leave the industry right after this, I will have the least impact if it's me. So, but we're going to open it up for questions in a little bit. But what I found out, and the reason why I am friends with many of these folks and why I like to be around them, is I learn more about how to fix things, not by asking people technical questions, but by figuring out how people think. And so I wanted to ask each of them a question that would just sort of give us, it's a unique opportunity to get an idea of how these amazing, amazing repair people actually think about who they are in this industry and how they approach things. So is that okay for everybody? You can all feel free not to answer. And then we can open up to the standard questions like mother's maiden name and social security number. So we can start with this. The first question is, you're all very successful in this industry. And let's put guitar repair aside. What about you do you think has made you be able to get to this level in your industry? What about your personality do you think actually gets you here?
Let's go down the line.
Yeah, we'll go down the line and I'll come up with something based on your answers.
I think maybe being unemployable in any other field is a good, kind of lights a fire, because God, I don't know. I think about that all the time, and I feel like it would be the same process for someone who's getting out of jail after like 30 years. It's like, I don't mess with computers. I'm not good with people. So yeah, a lack of other options, I think.
Is there like a... Well, thank God for guitar repair. Do you think that there's like something about your personality that sort of lined you up for this gig?
No.
Clearly.
I don't know. It's just something I've always enjoyed, and it's just gratifying, and
makes you feel good.
It makes me feel good, and that's why I do it.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend who once said, "You fix things because you're broken." Trev.
Well, I guess I've always kind of tinkered with things, and I was in the jewelry and metalsmithing studio in college and just kind of get sucked into this vortex of like detail. Yeah. And I started slowly to put these ideas together of like, I can just sit there and finesse these tiny little pieces of metal till they're shiny enough to then go to the buffing wheel. I mean, like just that attention to detail was always there, and kind of like some kind of hyper focus. So when this idea of like working on instruments kind of bit me, it literally turned into like, what else is there? Yeah. And I don't know any other way to explain it. It was just like, that was it. It was just details. There's so many details to focus on guitars.
And you're planning to bring the attention to detail to your work soon?
Eventually, it'll get there.
No, you're awesome.
But just, it was so gratifying. I don't know. It was a thing that enriched me in what I needed in, just my life, I guess.
Sure.
Just it was just kind of an amazing moment to be in that studio and realize that like the detail stuff was my thing.
Nice.
So I try and bring that to even any old instrument, you know. If it's a Squire and needs a new nut, that nut is going to be better than any other thing you've seen. That kind of thing.
Mr. Stutman.
I'm really happy to be on this side of these two because I don't want to follow either of those two with the answer to this question. But I guess two things. I think I'm observant to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
I naturally see thousandths of an inch, and it's a curse. And beyond that, I have this profound need for quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't not do things that way. And I don't have any appreciation for things that aren't made, fixed, built, or otherwise, or acted in that way. So I think that's my gig.
That's it.
That's
all
it.
I got.
I got more questions for Mark, but I'll just go. So I've been wondering much of my career when this moment would come up, and leave it to Evan to sort of bring it up, because I thought he's going to want me to answer this honestly. And the truth is, because he's looking for the deeper meaning behind this, and if you happen to have one alcoholic parent, you're likely to end up being a poet, a musician, something in the arts. In my case, I had two alcoholic parents. And that's really kind of how I ended up doing this work, if I'm being totally honest, because growing up in an alcoholic family is, it's too long of a subject to go into here, but I'll just tell you one incident early on in my career when I knew, yikes, what the heck is going on here? I was working in Dana Bourgeois' shop where I trained, and Dana had an issue with putting lids back on containers. It drove me crazy, but I picked up the zip strip one day, and I shook it, as you have to do, and the lid blew off the zip strip. And it went all over the new case cover. Eric Schoenberg had an old OM case recovered with new Tolex. It was beautiful. And it went all over that new case. So here's a moment where a kid from an alcoholic family swings into action, and I managed to get the zip strip off the case before there was any damage. That's not possible for somebody who grows up in a family other than mine, because you learn to sweep stuff under the rug fast, so you don't get caught. And it actually, in that situation, in that alcoholic family, it seemed like nothing but trouble at the time. But as my life went on, I realized, man, there are some real pluses to this as well. And that's just an example where Eric never knew. He's not going to know until after he listens to this podcast. He'll find out. But I managed to get this stuff off the case. So it's just an example. And if I'm being totally honest, it's really how I do what I do. I grew up as a kid learning to make things appear like nothing bad happened here. There's nothing to see here. And that happens to be a really great skill to have when you're fixing broken guitars. And I just applied all that early knowledge in this woodworking, and I just make stuff go away. That came naturally to me. And I love music. That's really my main thing is the music, but I found a way to apply that early experience in my career. And you've all heard it said before, when you're doing what you love, it's really not work. And Dana's wife would yell down at 10:30 at night, TJ, time to go home. I just never wanted to leave. I couldn't get enough of it. I just love doing this work, and I still feel that way. So anyway,
Awesome.
Does that answer the question?
That was good.
Oh.
Top that, Joe.
So they say, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I haven't gotten there yet. I'm in an interim gig right now, but I know why. I love the intersection between players and instruments and the resultant music. my clients tend to be full-time players, which is my choice. We could have easily gone the doctor, lawyer stuff, more lucrative gig, but I love that intersection. I love saying yes. And then kind of like TJ, once you say yes to something, you have to make it look like it was effortless. When 90% of the time, in my shop, I've got a shop of 8 guys working. I'm the guy who gets the stuff. I'm the Mikey. Let's see if Mikey will eat it. And most of the time, it's big problems. I love problem solving. All these guys are master problem solvers. My pals now, Ned Steinberger, these guys that I grew up idolizing, they are badass problem solvers. So I've already got that problem. That's my virus. Can you do it? Can you do it better? But for me, it is making the happy ending between the music and the people and their instrument. And by the way I see it, every instrument times every person is a brand new and unique thing. So if you have 6 instruments, your relationship to all 6 of them is very different. And you're nothing like that guy, nothing like that guy. So I like that. I like that happy ending. I like all the psychology, all of the reverse psychology that goes into finding out. They go, yeah, I want it to be, we've never heard this before. Low as it can go without buzzing. That means a million different things. I love that aspect and of trying to figure out how do you put all this stuff together, make it seem like it was effortless when it never is effortless. And when the person picks it up, they think, this guy's pretty good. That's all I want, is them to think it came out pretty good. I mean, hopefully if they had any idea, they would have a different thing. But to me, that's the job and the reward.
Nice. All right, I'm going to answer this as quickly as I can. So I grew up with a dad who is a very famous director and cameraman for TV commercials. So I grew up very privileged. So there was supposed to be a lot of infrastructure behind me where I could smoke pot and play bass for the rest of my life. But things didn't pan out that way. So I was considered the sort of dumb one in the family. My brother was very academic and very amazing. And so I internalized some need to sort of not disappoint people. And so when I started playing bass, I very quickly became really good. And actually my first gig was at CBGB's playing with 20-year-olds when I was 13. And they drew a fake mustache on me and put a hat on me to get me in. Then in 1986, I started selling guitars on 48th Street, and I became the top guitar salesman in the country for about 5 or 6 years. Then when I got into guitar repair, I quickly got very well known and very good at it. But when I don't know about good at it, but very successful at it. But what I realized was my inability to disappoint somebody was what drove me, and it had nothing to do with me wanting to do quality work. It had to do with, I need you to be happy with me. So it was a very personal thing on my level. So I'm going to ask a second question. Okay. I think everybody here is possibly at the highest point where they can be in their career right now. I mean, we've all hit a level that is almost unattainable, but we're doing it. At this point, what are you still struggling with, personality-wise, that is not that would get you to another level where you look at it and you say, this is what's holding me back?
I find I'll still struggle with time management. I'll still struggle with taking on stuff that I shouldn't take on. Like you said, I'm very much a people pleaser. And if something comes in, and especially if it's something that other guys wouldn't want to take on, there's that little thing in you that's like, well, maybe I'm the guy. Maybe I'm going to knock it out of the park. And yeah, that's got me into a lot of corners. And so yeah, I think right now one of my big challenges is saying no to stuff that one isn't going to make me money, and isn't going to be a cost-effective, time-effective thing for me.
I'm pleased with your answer, if that helped.
I'd say for me, the difficulty is time management, but mostly because I also build guitars. So as much as I want to repair and please the clients coming in, I also have a order list that I need to fulfill. So there's a balancing act between how much of my day might go towards one thing or another. But I'm working on it, and we'll get through it together. But that's the main challenge.
Nice.
And thankfully, we've got each other to bounce ideas off of when we do get into these sticky situations. That's been a real game changer. Just the internet allowing so much access.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near as accomplished as I think I need to be. Not even close. Is that a challenge? Is that good, bad, otherwise? I think all of us here and so many other people in any creative pursuit, that is an underlying and fundamental driver.
Right. It begs the concept is all of us have something that you would refer to as a frozen need, which is a need from childhood to do something, and it's unfulfillable. So you either resign yourself to the fact that that is what drives me, or you say to yourself, that is what is driving me, and maybe I am where I need to be, and everything's okay.
Right.
Yeah. That's,
Get it. Less profoundly, I'm very lucky that I have a successful retail store.
Right.
You're looking at one of the biggest loss leaders in the musical instrument world right here, and if I abandoned Folkway and its ability to sell guitars, I would go broke pretty quick working the speed I work and going to the degree that I go on the jobs that I go to. People look at the work that I do and they're like, how do you do that? On some, that's the way I feel about TJ's work, but it's because I'm not concerned about the bottom dollar.
right. It's almost like, how couldn't I have done that?
I just can't, I can't not do that work. Right. And I've structured my existence at my store to allow me to do what I need to do for my own fulfillment, fulfillment of whatever need it is that I'm fulfilling. And my customers unknowingly are getting a lot more than they pay for.
Right on.
And sometimes knowingly, right? But yeah, I mean, I do own a retail store, and I'm heavily invested in the retail operations, and up until very recently, maybe the last 5 or 6 instruments, I have written every word of copy for our website text, instrument listings. There's like 6,000 instruments that I've written I can't think of another way to say it sounds good.
Right.
And I'm done. And so thankfully I've recently hired someone who can write in sort of my voice, and you can't tell, which is great. But time management it's going to be everyone's Achilles heel it is so much. I mean, you do a setup for someone and you spend 20 minutes interacting with them in front and back, and you spend 13 minutes cleaning your bench, and then you have to probably spend 5 minutes changing the belt sander because it's too dull, and maybe your chisel,
Right.
and you're charging $100 for it. It just doesn't add up. Time management is a big problem for all of us.
Cool.
But yeah, I think mostly the biggest problem is knowing when to say good enough is good enough. That's for me. That's a biggie.
There you go.
My turn?
Absolutely.
So stop me if I'm not answering the question. But I'd probably have a different answer if I hadn't already talked about being the kid from an alcoholic family. But since I mentioned that, one of the things that I came out of that family with was nobody ever asked me how I felt about something. Nobody ever said to me, what's your opinion? Nobody ever said, we want to know what makes you tick. We want to know what you value. And what I found getting into this business is that people started asking me. They started putting me on stage, and they said, we want to hear what you have to say. And every time I'm like, You want to hear what I have to say? I didn't grow up with that. So this is a big deal for me to be able to be up here and have people want to listen to what I have to say and contribute. And it so much affected my life that I couldn't get any work done, because when somebody would come in my shop, I love talking about this stuff and I love hanging out with people and I love talking with people. And it turns out that's not really, that doesn't lend itself to building a retirement account, which I'm admitting to you now, I don't really have. And it's because I spent so many years talking so much, because people would ask me questions and I'd spend way too long answering them, like I am now, with too much information in detail. So I wasn't building a retirement account, and I was holding myself back from this important, now that I'm like, I don't know how old I am, 60-something, 66 or 67, Mark, 67 now, I just turned 67. So, I'm at the age where I'm like, I'm supposed to be building a retirement account. And I look at my account, it's like, you gotta be kidding. So it was such an issue for me that I had to basically keep people out of my workspace. So that's what I've been doing now. And COVID actually really helped. I was a big fan of COVID. Because I have a plek machine and people would come in with their repairs, or with their guitar to be plecked. And I would walk every person through the whole plek process. They loved it. Just the whole time I just had to explain to them the plek. They were like, I've heard about a plek. How does it work? And I spent twice as much time, and I realized I was making no money doing this. Then COVID came along. I had them drop it off in the safe holding area, and I started making money. And I was like, wow, it's just like Joe told me. He said, this is like having an ATM in your shop. And I was like, I'm just losing money with this thing. So he said, well, you're doing something wrong. Once COVID came along, I realized, oh, I'm making money with this plek. So now COVID's over, whatever. I'm going to reinstitute COVID policy in my shop, I think, and start making money again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 2020, COVID year, was a financially normal year in my shop, but I didn't have people in my shop for 14 months, and I got so much done. It was amazing.
Yeah, same. I actually started making money, and I could see the possibility of building a retirement account, which is still kind of blowing my mind. I know how I can do it. I got to keep people out and stop talking to people. I miss it because I like people and I like guitars, but I have to think about a retirement account, and I'm holding myself back by talking too much. So anyway, does that kind of get to this?
Perfect.
Okay.
So I like what Mark said about being a lost leader, because as I told you guys, we have multiple employees. My guys specialize, by the way. We work in one hand. It could have come from me. It could have come from somebody else. There's a right way a Martin nut from X year looks, and it doesn't matter whether Adam did it or Max did it. We do it one way. And I learn every day something. I travel a lot. I teach because I am a plek guy. And when TJ needed a machine, I selfishly became the installer trainer because I wanted to see his shop, and changed a lot of things, including I have the famous TJ Thompson exhaust system, by the way. Let me just take an extra second to tell you people about this. In his shop, he has a roll-up door. He's got one of those giant fire department fans that sits in front of it, and he's got a backpack leaf blower. And when it's time to clean the shop, he opens the door, turns on the fan, puts on the backpack leaf blower, and blows everything out. And if there's nothing else you guys learn here, if you guys do repair, your next ideal shop should have this, because this is problem-solving genius, outside the box, problem-solving genius at its best. Okay, that had nothing to do with anything. But what Mark said, so I've always been curious. I came out of the Bay Area. I kind of went to school as an English major, but also in mechanical engineering. And I've been very interested in how does tech help you do a better job, and at what point do you put up a wall and go, tech stops here, hand skills go from there. So my shop runs, we built a shop management software which we distribute. My guys are I'm on the double standard system. They're held to being productive, get something done. Sure, they run into trouble, but they should have it done in a certain amount of time. Me as the boss, that doesn't apply. I end up spending way too much time, like you guys, on things. I don't use the system myself because I don't want to face how much time it took, but I want the stuff to happen. But it's a learning experience. what I learned from that, from every problem I take and try to get to this level, which I never will hit, but I try to get to this level, is that I'm an imposter. I suffer, to answer your question, I suffer the imposter syndrome, which is that I am a piece of, and that nothing I ever do is to that bar level. And that's what I struggle with personally. Of course, the bar goes up every time you realize that that you didn't quite get to what you think. I wear magnifiers, the Dan Erlewine look, which I used to make fun of. But if you look at something at 2x, the civilian customer who looks at it at 1x, normal sight, is going to go, man, you painted this grain? You can't tell that. Well, at 4x, you'd see it very easily. 2x, hopefully you don't see it. So that whole thing about the resolution of your self-judgment is the key to everything. And you have to go, I don't know anything. I'm going to learn something. Today, I've visited hundreds of shops and factories because I'm part of the Plek company. Everywhere, the worst shop in the world, I learned something. And I've realized I'm still in junior high of getting through this. So struggling between that thing of being put on something of a pedestal, like all of us are, and at the same time internally going, I hope I don't get discovered. This is
Yes.
the eternal the internal struggle, and probably not a bad thing. By the way, TJ, so I took a course in air conditioning because I wanted to be able to fix my own air conditioners because they go out constantly. I took this night class, and the guy started talking about air conditioning and refrigerators, and he said, when you go to somebody's house and you're fixing their refrigerator, don't get caught up in explaining to them how refrigeration works. And I told you that. Anyway, that's a side note.
No, but the imposter thing, that is the thing. So for me, based on what I told you about my first answer, is my struggle is trying to internalize that I'm not the dumb one in the room. And regardless of the evidence that piles up that is in contrary to that, it is always that feeling that I am an imposter and that I've had a good run, but it's the end of the road and, and now's my time. But what I found the most valuable thing, and many of us work alone and some of us don't, but one of the things that I've done over the years is foster really good friendships with my direct competition in New York City. So every Friday on the way to visit my nephew, which I've been doing every Friday for 14 years because I am the best uncle, I stopped by my main competition shop, 30th Street Guitars, and he and I become best friends, and we psychoanalyze each other for 2 hours. But he taught me something, and I always go there to learn something, is based on what I told you, my doubt is that I can't do it. And I overthink things, and I'll sit there freaking out, thinking about whatever stupid thing I have to do. And what I realized is my mind will latch on the simplest thing possible and then think it can go wrong, like drilling an end pin jack. I'll be like, I'll grind on it, like, how could this go south? And then I just have to do it. And then my mind can latch on to something else to worry about. But what I noticed about my buddy Matt is that he did not have the same issue I did. So if something needed to be done, he would just grab a tool and just do it. And that is what I tried to internalize. So if you are able to, does everybody here, who here fixes guitars for a living? And who here is not in that industry and like consumer? Okay, so in life, if you can find somebody who doesn't collude with your bullshit and finds what you think you are afraid of is absolutely preposterous, cleave to them, because you will learn a lot and get a little bit of healing done with that. So the reason why I wanted to ask these questions of these amazing folks is that there's a lot of people here who are not in this industry, and we don't have a lot of opportunities to speak to people who are not in our industry. We do like conventions and stuff where it's a whole bunch of guitar repair people and we're talking to the choir basically. But with the builders, you see their website and you get into their personality and stuff like that because they describe themselves and what they're going to bring to the build, blah, 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 blah. we're basically plumbers with less ass crack showing. So we're technicians, right? So when you come to us, be gentle, because we're all going through our own stuff, and we're just trying to fix stuff, and make you happy, because that's what we're trying to do. So, be kind to us. But I wanted to open this up to questions, if anyone has questions of anyone here. So,
Yeah, in the back.
yes, sir.
Hang on. Would you mind coming up and using the microphone for
Yeah,
us,
that would be
please?
great.
Yeah, you kind of have to, because it's probably going to be a podcast later.
Yeah.
We've all been around too much loud sound. Also, we're probably mostly deaf up here.
Yeah. I didn't hear anything you guys said. Could you repeat that?
So just a hypothetical question. Imagine a guy in his early 40s who works, IT as a career and has been passionate about guitars and repairs.
Does he look a lot like you, by the way?
Maybe. I don't know. He's hypothetical. You just
Oh,
have to
what's
imagine this
what's your
guy.
name, by the way?
I'm Logan.
Hi,
He's
Logan.
asking for a friend.
Yeah, asking for a friend. And, he's been passionate about guitars and repair and playing, building for about 25 years. What's the move? How does he get out of his current entanglements and jump ship? Get in there.
Get yourself fired, and then
I'm
it's
trying.
then
Oh,
it's
he's trying.
desperation.
Buy a bunch of cheap guitars and mess them up. Buy cheap guitars and mess them up, and don't worry about it. Don't do it don't start with nice stuff.
From a business standpoint, and this is something that I realized really early on, was start doing work for people who teach, because then they will send all their students to you. And if you are in this business, as long as many of us are, what happens is then those students teach, and they will send their students to you. And it just becomes this, I feel like the country doctor on Little House on the Prairie sometime, where it's like I'm working for the kids of my original customers, and the kids are on tour now. And it's like this, you're the North Star there, and everything else is changing around you. So, yeah.
Did you want to?
So back when I made the switch from being a teacher to luthiery, Dana Bourgeois happened to be living in the next town over from me. So I would advise some luck. It was, looking back on it, are you kidding me? He was the Martin guy at the time. He was trying to figure out what it would mean to repair vintage Martins. They weren't even called that back then. Old broken guitars, how to repair them correctly. There was no guide for it. Don Teeter's books were out there. That was it. There were no books, no videos, really. So you had to do an apprenticeship. So now what happens is everybody buys the same DVD series and the same books, and they all kind of know the same things. I would suggest looking around like towns nearby you and see if somebody like Dana lives nearby, and go to the shop and try to act like a super nice guy that someone would want to work with. And your friend, that is, not you, obviously. Yeah. And then see if we could kind of like go help out for free for a while, part-time, and then work yourself into a position where you're of help to them. And I don't know, that's how I learned, really. Dana was not from an alcoholic family, but he talked too much. I don't know where he got it. And he would just like spout these things out. Like he'd just exclaim something like, "Oh, look at this." And I'd be like, I was taking it in like a sponge. So get yourself in a situation like that if you can, and work side by side with somebody. That's what I would recommend. Because otherwise, the video stuff is fine, the DVDs and all that. It's just that, it has its limitations too. You want to distinguish yourself somehow. And I always tell people to kind of go towards what interests them. Like if some people are interested in finish work, find a niche if you can and sort of jump into that spot, because there's always room for that. Like Gurian, moving into making purfling and marquetry. Like that was fascinating to me, like going from a guitar maker to that specialty. And it just seems like there's always a place for those guys out there now. So anyway, I hope that's not too much, but
I have a very different perspective for your friend. I would say be careful what you wish for, because the grass is not necessarily greener over there, and I guarantee you'll take a decimal place off of your salary. I know people who are hobby luthiers and have a blast. I'm a hobby photographer. I love it. It's my hobby, and my balance has been shifted to photography lately from guitar repair after 25 years. I'll get back there, everyone. Don't worry. But if I had to do that for a living, man, I would hate it, right? And so I have clients who have taken up guitar repair, and they're buying old Kalamazoos and Ks and learning how to do neck sets and having the time of their lives doing it. Granted, in retirement or whatever, but man, go and get your MBA and get a good paying job and then buy guitars and fix them. If you are hell bent on taking a massive left turn in your life, definitely for me, the biggest learning came at the cost of my customers early on, because I didn't have the humility to think that I shouldn't be working on those guitars. And I screwed up some guitars, and it's not cool. And as Joe said, buy some guitars and fix those instead of fixing guitars for other people until you've got at least 400 times doing it under your belt.
Could I just add something to that? So my father, who passed away a few years ago, which is why I, like a good child of alcoholic family, I wasn't going to talk about this until he died because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But I would, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. He said to me long before he died, because he knew my excitement for this work, and he said, why are you going into that field? Like when I was switching from teaching, I said, I love it. I can't get enough of it. And he said, I know, that's why I'm asking you. Why do you want to go into that? Because he understood what Mark is saying on a level that I couldn't. And luckily he was kind of wrong about that, because I still really love it. But as I mentioned earlier, I had to get rid of the people.
But TJ, would you love it if you were working on, like 1984 Gibsons and you had to make new nuts for every one of them 4 times a day?
No, probably not.
No, you'd lose your mind.
Were the checks coming in? Because it's a business.
Like that's what you do. I mean,
that's what
I can't do it. I can't. You can't.
Somebody once asked me that and was like, "What if you only had to work on Squires?" And I was like, "Are they going to keep coming?" And that's my job.
We differ so hard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Because I don't even like guitars. No, and it's not I don't have a passion for them, and that's what makes me clinical, where I can get the nicest guitar in the world, and the second it's done, I close the case and I move on to the next guitar.
Yeah.
I want to piggyback something on what TJ said, because even though I lost 40 pounds, I still don't think he can physically piggyback me. But he said something about the videos and the DVDs that are out there, and this is the most important thing that I think all of us know, is that we're in an amazing age of information where we can go online and find out how to cut a nut or something, or go to a school and they will show us the way that they say you need to cut a nut. But the way I grew up, and the way all these folks probably grew up, is there was no internet when we started doing this. So each of us know 10, 20 different ways to do the same job. And the way that we pick them is either because that's what applies to this job, or just to entertain ourselves to do something differently. So one thing that I could suggest is, if you go online and see a method to do something, or go to a school and they tell you how to do something, the first thing you should do when you go home is do it a different way, and then do it a different way than that way, and then have all of these ways to do the same job under your belt, because they're all going to come in at some point where you just need it, and you go, oh, this needs that. And
To me, that was a very surprising thing. I had worked at Sadowski Guitars for 5 years, and I had made 2 very specific style nuts for different instruments.
And then you went to Gary
I
Brower.
go to Gary Brower in San Francisco, and he hands me a GNL something or other with a broken nut, and was like, the break-in period of new employment was like, I don't know, here's a few jobs today, and we'll see how it goes. And damn, it's completely different.
Yeah, I grew up.
The slot is a little wider, and all the math that you think you know doesn't apply anymore.
Exactly, because everything is different. I grew up completely isolated with no one. I never apprenticed with anyone. I never studied with anyone. I didn't know what I was doing, basically. And yeah, I'm sure my work showed it at a certain point. But 2 years after I opened my business, I started getting emails from, I was referred to by Roger Sadowski. And at that point, I knew that I was probably on the right track because Roger was sending folks to me when he stopped doing repairs. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I looked in my shop one day and I had Rodney Jones and Paul Bollenbeck, who are amazing jazz guitarists, in my shop on the couch talking, and I pick up the phone and it's Wayne Krantz. And I had to stop, and I was like, oh, this is it, I guess. This is how things are going to be now. So it was nice.
One thing you touched on, all you guys have touched on, is that there is an internet now. And there's a downside, which is that you don't have to want something as bad as you used to have to want. Also, I'm not going to say that a lot of that stuff isn't true, but there's 27 ways to do something, and 3 of them work, and the other 24 really don't. And you have to be very careful, and they can be professed by people who are looked up to tremendously, and they can have tremendous confidence. To Evan's point, I kind of came up having to teach myself. There's 2 real advantages to doing that and looking at the internet some, but not living by it. One is that you won't go down a path that turns out to 6 years later turn to be an error that you can't go back and erase. The second thing is if you have to think for yourself, you're going to find some things that despite the fact that all this has been in front of all of us all these years, nobody figured out yet. And you become the person who has the aha moment. Not that that matters, but it'd be good for you. And you have to be very, you know, the thing that I do, I always think about, okay, how do people do this? Why do they do it that way? What are 2 other ways? This is what I put my guys through. You know, they go, we got to do this. How do we do it? And I go, give me 3 ways. And they give me 3 ways. And they give me the RCA dog kind of, that one of them. And I go, well, do I like that? And they'll look at me and they'll go, no, you don't like that. I'll go, think, what's another way? And these are the guys who are saying, I don't know how to do something. And if they sit there and they ask themselves the question, are these things I was thinking about doing the best way to do something, the best way to plug this crack, the best way to whatever? Putting themselves through that thing of going, let me think about this. I know you do this. You're going to do much better work because you're making yourself solve the problem. You're not leaning on all these people who do something and might be doing a bozo solution. Like the way people do nut height is still 50% of the guitar repair and manufacturers are just completely wrong about how they go about it. So ask yourself, don't lean on other people. Put yourself through the torture of asking yourself, why do people do it this way? Are they just doing what everybody else did, or is it the best way? This is critical, and you can only do this as well when you're starting. So you're lucky in that respect. But if you don't have to do what you're talking about doing, you're not the right guy. If you have to do it, you're the right guy.
Also, I'm sorry, Tyler, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, to that point, I think the idea of getting into a career in luthiery as a means to get yourself out of an entanglement is a little bit paradoxical and silly. It can get messy. It's not the work avoidance scheme that a lot of people think it is, working on guitars. So then I think that goes to show, at that point. But
I have something I'd like to add to offer you a tool to help you know when to scroll on by. And it's the word replica. This gets under my skin. And I've texted a few of these guys and I say, you got to stop using that word. It really irritates me. And I can tell on a blurry phone from 3 feet away that it's not a good copy of the bridge that's supposed to be on that vintage Martin. It's not a correct fingerboard. I mean, you can see this stuff and they're calling, I just replicated this neck. I'm like, please, it's offensive, it's insulting. Scroll on by those guys. When you start seeing that word, like I'm one of the guys who's supposed to be able to do that, and I never use that word. To me, it's insulting to the 6 guys who actually made that guitar back in the 30s. So anyway, that's one of the tools I use. Yep. Scroll on by.
Be careful with the internet. I did a Stu Mac video years ago, right? And just randomly in the Stu Mac video, I showed the way that I cut off strings. And the way I do it is at the machine head, I wiggle it off and it breaks, right? And a baby could suck on it and not get hurt because it's that smooth. And I've been doing that forever. I could have shot the Pope on that video, and that's the kind of comments I got from that. Like, this guy's the stupidest guy in the world. I'd never bring a guitar to him. And it was like hysterical. Like, it's just, I'm like, I don't know. I've only done this 150,000 times and it never fails. So, I think it's probably okay. But one little tip, and it was something I think Joe touched on, was the longer you do this, the more customers you have, the more you get to pick and choose what you get to do. And one of the best things that I've figured out to do is sometimes take a break from doing a specific job, because that is the only way you can think about it flexibly. Because if you're constantly in your face doing something, you do not gain perspective by banking away from it. So for years, I just didn't want to do bridge glues anymore. And then I didn't think it was cost effective for the way that I was doing them. And then one day it just hit me of a different way to fit the bridge. And I was just like, oh, okay. And then I started doing them again, and I got bored with it. And then I thought of a different way. And it's just, if you do something every day and it's a grind, you can't think about it. So it's good to have the flexibility to do something. Yeah.
We got a lot of mileage out of that one question.
A lot of what? Yeah. Any other questions? What's your name? Micah, can you come up to the thing?
We don't have a lot of time left.
Oh, I figured, yeah.
Or any, but
Where are we time-wise?
pretty much.
Bye. Okay, this will be the last question, and then we'll say our
All
goodbyes.
right. Well, hopefully this will be a quick one. I'm in my third year at working at a shop, Chicago Fretworks, down the street. I'm kind of in the weeds in my career. And right now, when you're spiraling with a repair, when you're just struggling, what's your go-to? How do you get out of that? What's your go-to strategy to
Put it
calm
aside.
down?
Put it aside.
Remembering it's just a guitar.
Yeah, I step away. I walk around the building. I work in a multi-million square foot old mill building. Go outside. It's literally half a mile to walk around the thing. You just decompress, because the thing is just sitting there. You're the problem, right? It's not the guitar. Literally every job, it's either the client's the problem, I'm the problem. The guitar just sits there. So until a human gets involved, that thing is doing nothing.
One of the most important things I learned that I claim TJ said, and he says he didn't really say it, is the first thing to do is make a deal with the guitar. I'm not going to mess with you. You don't mess with me.
Yeah.
This sounds like, yeah, but it's incredibly valuable if you really do it. And you really have to do it. You get into trouble, something's not going, you have to say, we're in this together, and then you have to be able to walk away, and then you have to come back and work together with it. You have to work together with it. It's not you lording your power over the instrument. It's this interactive thing. It's touchy-feely and baloney as that sound. It's incredibly important.
I did say a version of that. I was talking about keeping your ego out of it.
The other thing that I actually use psychologically all the time is, if I'm struggling with something, is I put it aside and then do several things that I can nail flawlessly, so that I reaffirm my male dominance over the guitars and know that I know what I'm doing. And usually while I'm doing those jobs that I don't have to think about, I can think about the job that's spiraling.
Happens to me all the time, and I've discovered that you just start. You take one little step, and as soon as you start doing something, everything gets easier, and the next step becomes clear, even though you didn't think of it before the first step. It's like that in every walk of life, with everything.
Yeah, I think getting out of the shop is big for me, going for a walk if you can. I don't know if you have access to the shop at all hours, but if you do, I'd go back after hours and there's nobody there. That can be a really good way to kind of clear your head and get a project straight again.
Also, when you're laying in bed, the best drafting board in the world is the ceiling.
Yep.
And a lot of the and this again sounds stupid, but a lot of the problems that I struggle with, I'll solve in that thing, because you can kind of do, I'll erase that, and And think about the fact that for the 27 ways to do something, don't just go, I'm doing it, it's not working. Think, okay, maybe I'm going down the wrong road. I have the humility to say, okay, maybe it's time for me to stop. And then again, call your friends and say, listen, I'm in trouble. What would you do? Because nobody's going to laugh at you. And somebody's going to have, there's not one way to do something, and they're going to have a suggestion. And the best thing is take a picture and put it on Facebook, because all those people know the answers to everything.
All right, so we're going to wrap up. I truly privileged to be on the stage with these people, and it is again one of those contradictions to me, feeling dumb that you folks were here. So I want to thank Tyler Geske and Trevor Healy.
Thank you.
Mark Stutman, TJ Thompson, Joe Glaser. I'm Evan Gluck. I'll be here all week. Try the veal. And I will offer, if anyone is up for it, if you do have technical questions that weren't answered here, I mean, I'm available if you want to ask me, if anyone else is available there,
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, I wasn't lying. They went deep, didn't they? That was our guitar repair panel from the 2024 Fretboard Summit. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Keep the feedback coming, podcast@fretboardjournal.com. And as always, if you love the show, leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts. And by all means, go onto Facebook, go onto whatever platform you use, and share this podcast with your friends. It does help us grow.